All right. Well, good morning, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants event. My name is Joe Grabowski, and I'll be your host for today. For those who might be new to Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants, we're all about bringing science, adventure, exploration, and conservation live into classrooms across North America and beyond. So with the school year now in full swing, we're broadcasting 30, 40, even 50 live events a month that classrooms can join into. All right, so this month our theme has been ocean plastics. So we've been talking to scientists, to explorers, to filmmakers and artists all around the world who have, dedicated their lives to not only shining a spotlight on this issue, whether it's bringing it media live to us, creating art installations, but they're also looking for solutions, innovative ways that we can stop putting the plastic into the ocean and finding ways to remove some of the damage that we have already done. Okay, so moving on to today's event. So excited to have Philippe Cousteau joining us today. He was inspired by the legacy of his grandfather, Jacques Cousteau. He is a multi-Emmy-nominated TV host and producer, an author, a speaker, and an entrepreneur. His conservation efforts are focused on solving global, social, environmental problems. So in 2004, he founded EarthEcho International, dedicated to inspiring youth to act now for a sustainable planet. So it's been operating for over 10 years now and has firmly established itself as a leading youth environmental education program. So Philippe, I'm going to bring you in now. So great to have you joining us live today to talk plastics.
Delighted to be here, Joe. As always, great fun. It's such a huge issue that we're dealing with around the world, as you know, and so pleased to be part of this whole month dedicated to it that you've pulled together.
All right, excellent. Well, you're right. It is absolutely a global issue. We were using an estimate earlier that about 8 million tons enter our ocean each year. And then I read an article recently that it could be as high as 11 now. So it's definitely something that should be on the front of everybody's mind.
It is. That's the equivalent of at least one New York City garbage truck every minute, just backing up and dumping all of that plastic right into the ocean. And as we know, I'm sure it's covered by many speakers, every single piece of plastic ever still exists on Earth. It does not go away. That's one thing I want to kick off here with is an urge to all our viewers to change your vocabulary. There's no such thing as away. When we throw stuff away, it goes somewhere. It doesn't just magically disappear into the ether. So we need to be thinking differently, I think, about the language that we use and how we think about the products that we use in our daily lives. So with that, good morning, good afternoon, as Joe said, to everybody out there. Good evening, perhaps, who knows, to all of you all over watching. I'm delighted to spend about 30, 40 minutes with you. I do we encourage kind of questions and stuff. I know we've got we've got folks joining from all over the place. And Joe in the background there, good questions that come through. Please, happy to answer and have a discussion as we go along. So if something comes up and you want to ask something, please do so, and we'll get to those. So plastics. As Joe said, my name is Philippe Cousteau. You can see it on the screen there. I'm the founder of EarthEcho International. We're a leading youth environmental education organization. And I founded that organization 15 years ago. And one of our most recent expeditions is called Plastic Seas, where we've been exploring this issue of plastic pollution extensively. And the reason that we're doing that is because EarthEcho is dedicated to exploring all sorts of different environmental issues, predominantly related to the ocean, because we really believe that young people are not just the leaders of tomorrow, but the leaders of today. 15 years working in environmental education, inspired by my grandfather, who was Jacques Cousteau. Now, for those of you who may not know who that is, he was a pioneer of exploration, particularly in the ocean. He, 76 years ago, so a lifetime ago, he co-invented the aqualung with an engineer named Émile Gagnon in France. Now, aqualung is what we call scuba diving today. And prior to that invention in the early 1940s, I think it's hard for all of you to imagine. It's hard for me to imagine. But when my grandfather was your age, all we knew about the ocean was really what we dumped in trash and what we pulled out in seafood in our fishing nets. Because the only way that people could explore the ocean prior to that invention that my grandfather pioneered was either through wearing these big hard helmets where you clomp around on the bottom of the ocean, big lead boots, and there was a hose that would connect you to the boat above you that would be pumping. There would be two men typically pumping air down into the hard helmet into your suit so that you could breathe. This was very dangerous and very difficult, and something that was typically reserved for salvage divers or for the military. Or you could free dive, holding your breath, right, which would limit you to just a few minutes of dive time. And that was for the for pretty much the existence of humanity. Dive helmets and diving bells actually, believe it or not, goes back to the Greeks, but very limited ability for people to explore the ocean. And so this invention in the 1940s was revolutionary. 1942, 1943 was revolutionary because it allowed people to swim freely in the ocean, and it opened up an era of human exploration. Prior to that time, the oceans were really seen as something that you passed over, not something that you went into. And now we take for granted Nemo and Flipper and images of sharks and coral reefs and all these things that we've all grown up with. But again, back then they were a mystery, and it's hard to imagine just a lifetime ago. And what we've learned in that period of time is wondrous and extraordinary. The ocean is full of mysteries still to this day. Whenever humans descend into the deep ocean, we discover something new. But it's also brought a knowledge about how much human beings are impacting the ocean and what we're doing to it. The ocean is the life support system of this planet. And one of the big issues that we talk about today, climate change, is an ocean problem, because the ocean regulates our climate. It provides food to billions of people. It provides most of our oxygen in our atmosphere that we breathe. It doesn't come from forests. It comes from phytoplankton in the ocean. And yet, oftentimes, we continue to overlook and underestimate the importance of the ocean. Most recently, a product that up until a few years ago was largely seen as incredibly convenient and incredibly useful, and really just a benefit to humanity, plastic. We've started to realize that there's a tremendous cost to that plastic, which, by the way, as I'm sure you've heard, is a petroleum product. So one of the problems that we've realized particularly is that plastic pollution ends up in the ocean largely. Again, there's no such thing as away. Unfortunately, the ocean typically ends up being that away place that we talk about. As we said earlier, 8 million tons a year, maybe more like 11 million. It's likely that we're underestimating that. On top of the hundreds of millions of tons that already exist in the ocean. And again, every single piece of plastic that was ever produced continues to exist today. Plastic photodegrades. In other words, through sunlight, it breaks down into smaller and smaller pieces, but never goes away, as opposed to biodegrading, where it breaks down back into its elements, biological elements, and re-enters the system. So, as a photodegrading product, plastic is detrimental at all different levels of the food web in the environment, and it also acts like a sponge, absorbing toxins, and re-enters in the food web and affects human beings. So we at EarthEcho, we launched an expedition 2 years ago called Plastic Seas, and we took a cohort of 25 teachers with us down to Port Phillip Bay, which is in Melbourne, Australia, in the southern part of Australia, in the state of Victoria. Melbourne is maybe lesser known than Sydney, but it's the second largest city in Australia. It's a fantastic city, and it sits right at the top of Port Phillip Bay. And the reason we wanted to go to Australia and Port Phillip Bay is because Port Phillip Bay itself is an astonishing ecosystem. It's actually a collection of about 16 different bays that open up into this very large area. And many of the animals that live in Port Phillip Bay are found nowhere else on Earth because of this confluence of water coming down from the warmer north, and Southern Ocean cold water coming up and meeting in this area and mixing, and it creates this really dynamic ecosystem that is unique in the world. And however, because of its proximity to Melbourne, this massive, urban area, it's experiencing some interesting dynamics. You have this very, well, I shouldn't say pristine, but this very dynamic, interesting ecosystem with all the pressures of an urban habitat piled on top of it. And that includes a lot of plastic. So when we went down to Melbourne, we wanted to explore this dynamic. And so we spent about a week down there filming lots of different little short video clips. I'll be showing a few of these coming up here soon. And exploring this issue with government officials, scientists, nonprofit organizations, etc. And in particular, trying to understand how plastics affect the ecosystem all along the way, and what are some of the solutions to this problem. So I wanted to fire up, get queued up the first video, because when we think about plastic, there are obviously the direct impacts that we can see in the ocean on the big animals. In this case, we went to check out a sea lion colony. And then we'll look a little bit at maybe some of the more unexpected impacts of plastic, and talk a little bit what we can do about that. So, Joe, why don't we run that first video?
You might actually be able to hear them is a haul out of Australian fur seals, and we're about to get in the water and actually interact with these fur seals. It's one of the most exciting things that you can do in the ocean. Within the Port Phillip Heads Marine National Park, EarthEcho teachers and I are visiting an area designed to benefit Australian fur seals. Their playful nature makes them a beloved mascot of the bay. When I dive down, they curiously approach and then quickly swim away. Unfortunately, this curiosity can result in entanglement with plastic rubbish and fishing gear that kills more than 1,500 of these underwater playful creatures each year. Nearby, Hopeside is home to a colony of seabirds above the water and a rich ecosystem below. Thick kelp beds create habitat for countless creatures down here. And visiting these two sites gave me a perfect glimpse into the ecosystem here in Southern Australia.
You heard that. Imagine 1,500 fur seals, not sea lions, that was my mistake, fur seals. There are sea lions there, but they're a different spot. Fur seals, 1,500 a year at least die getting caught up in fishing line and other types of plastic refuse. It's shocking. And of course, those seabirds as well that you saw there, and the kelp, the whole ecosystem is impacted by the plastic. And so what we wanted to do was get into the water. We explored it. It's cold water too. I don't know if you noticed, but I had a hood on and gloves. It's like, I don't know, gosh, maybe in the 40s, 40 degrees Fahrenheit, somewhere in 45 degrees Fahrenheit, somewhere in there. It's chilly, but worth it because it's just such a beautiful place to explore. And heartbreaking when you start to understand what the costs of these products are. Now, the average use of, say, a plastic bag is just a few minutes. Imagine that. We use something for a few minutes that then continues to pollute and kill for centuries. What's the return on that investment? Not a good return. And so looking at what was going on in Port Phillip Bay, we also wanted to explore maybe some more unexpected impacts of plastic, because you can imagine, like I said, fishing line. We've all seen photos and videos and social media and in the news, of animals caught up in fishing line, or eating plastic bags, whatever it may be, mistaking them for their food source like jellyfish. But the other issue is a little bit more insidious. Remember how I talked earlier about how plastic does not biodegrade, it photodegrades. So it's not necessarily just the plastic that you can see that's a problem in the ocean. It's also the plastic you can't see, microplastics. Because as that plastic photodegrades, breaks into smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller little pieces, they start to resemble phytoplankton and zooplankton and these tiny little plant and animal creatures that float in the ocean that provide food at the bottom of the food web. And most animals have not evolved to be discerning. They've not evolved to be like, oh, that's plastic. They don't know what plastic is. So if they see a tiny little piece of red, something floating in the water that looks an awful lot like a tiny little red copepod or some sort of zooplankton, some sort of planktonic animal, they're going to eat it. So that's one of the challenges. These animals have not evolved to understand what plastic is and to discern between their regular food and plastic. Now, what happens then is that you start to have all these little pieces of plastic start to be ingested by a variety of animals. And in the next video, we're going to look at a dissection of a bird bolus. And that is where birds regurgitate chunks of debris in their out into the environment after they've eaten. And what you find is that these bird boluses have an inordinate amount of little plastic pieces in them. Now, some birds are able to flush a lot of that plastic out of them, but we also find a lot of birds are unable to, and a lot of that plastic passes into their digestive system, and they starve on a full stomach. Think about that. Because plastic has no nutritional value, of course, and it just takes up space, and it can't be digested. And so eventually these animals feel like they're full, but they don't have any nutrients. And so as plastics replace traditional food source in the ecosystem, that's a big problem, as you can imagine. So let's roll that video.
Jen Lavers studies what seabirds are eating. And today, I'll get a unique look into her findings. So seabirds are a good indicator of the health of coastal ecosystems?
Absolutely. We call them our sentinels. They're
sentinel
kind of
species. A main way that you're investigating these seabirds and the health of these seabirds, and thus the health of the broader ecosystem, is through this.
Yes, through looking at seabird vomit.
Seabird vomit, delightful.
It tells us what the birds have been eating, both the good stuff and increasingly the bad stuff.
We'll dissect two examples of vomit, also known as bolus, that Jen has collected and frozen from gulls in the field. The first is a bird with a more natural diet.
It's nice to know he had some good stuff.
Yes, definitely. That looks like a hearty meal there. That's a pretty big fish. Those are big ribs.
See what else is in here.
We'll separate everything we find into different piles.
And then all the vegetation goes in one pile.
And the bones in another?
And the bones in another.
Good. Our first sample wasn't bad. Lots of seagrass and fish bones. But even a healthy diet shows traces of plastic pollution.
And this little bit of blue is actually a bit of plastic bag.
So far, nothing's been too alarming. But our second example tells a different story.
So this is clearly the top to a boxed milk, a Tetra Pak, and some aluminum foil, and goodness knows what else we're going to find in there. A bit of stone. That's plastic. So this is some of the bits of glass and stuff. That piece of glass is, really sharp.
Why are these birds eating plastic?
It's not really their fault. It's kind of a don't ask questions, just eat it approach. And that works really well in nature for many species where your food is going to be unpredictable. And in the marine environment in particular, plastic often doesn't look like plastic or smell like plastic because it's covered in algae, fish eggs. Sometimes it's been floating out in the ocean for decades.
How big is a gull's stomach?
Not that big. A bottle cap like this would take up the bulk of the capacity of the stomach.
So if these birds weren't able to regurgitate these items, it would fill up their stomach very quickly.
Absolutely, and that's the fate of so many seabirds and other marine species, is that they can't regurgitate like our gulls, and so that's why it fills up and up and up.
Like albatross?
Albatross, shearwaters, turtles, and various other species.
So they don't regurgitate.
Exactly, they can't get it up.
Birds, dolphins, our beaches, and seas. Plastics persist in the environment and are threatening many species, including people. And as we'll see next, we must engineer newer and safer materials for the products we use every day. To learn more about plastic pollution and find out how you can take action to make a positive difference in your community, visit EarthEcho International at earthecho.org. EarthEcho Expedition is sponsored by the Northrop Grumman Foundation. Northrop Grumman is a leading global security company dedicated to increasing STEM education opportunities for students and the teachers who inspire them.
Pretty shocking. And it's not nearly as gross, actually, as you might think it is. The bird bolus is pretty dried up. I know we talk to a lot of young people about it. They're like, "Oh, bird vomit, oh, gross." But it's actually fascinating. As you saw, you see the bones. You can really see the types of food that they're eating, and then, of course, all the plastic. So a huge problem, and one that is, I think, indicative again of just how insidious and pervasive plastics are in the ecosystem. And how they're in many cases affecting the food web. Albatross, you heard, shearwaters, sea turtles, lots of different animals that cannot regurgitate what's in their stomach. And so that plastic eventually will kill them. But in addition to that, there is, of course, you have the big animals like the sea lions, etc. Then we looked at some of the smaller insidious impacts of microplastics on the ecosystem. But then, of course, you have the animals that live within the water column that are being affected by this plastic pollution crisis. And one in particular I wanted to share with you because, you know, the area around Melbourne and indeed around Australia is so remarkable. The variety and the diversity of creatures that live there, that live nowhere else on Earth, is breathtaking. And one of my favorites is a weedy sea dragon. Related to seahorses, weedy sea dragons. I remember we were diving in Tasmania about a decade ago for a series on BBC that I was hosting. And we found weedy sea dragons amongst the kelp forest of Tasmania. And they are truly amazing creatures. They have every different color on them, iridescent and fluorescence. And they're about this big, maybe about a foot long. And they're one of the weirdest looking animals. So I wanted to share this video clip with you and also highlight some of the other creatures that live in and around Port Phillip Bay that are being impacted by this plastic. But take a look at this conversation I had with a good friend of mine who's a really talented and dedicated photographer, filmmaker, and educator down in Melbourne.
One person who's grown up here and spent countless hours observing and documenting threats to these habitats is marine biologist and filmmaker Cherie Maris.
Cherie, I'm so excited that you're spending some time with us. You're such an incredible filmmaker, storyteller, scientist. What makes the ocean ecosystem here in Southern Australia so unique?
So there's a number of different factors. We get the Eastern Australian current coming down along the coast. We also get the Lewin current. We also have upwelling, and so it just creates this really dynamic environment. And because of that isolation, it's created these animals that have been found nowhere else in the world.
And while we as humans might not prefer swimming around in cold water, that doesn't mean animals feel the same way. In fact, cold water is full of nutrients and food that support a vibrant habitat. And while marine protected areas are crucial to helping these habitats flourish, the marine life here is encountering man-made problems nonetheless.
Now, what are some of the threats that you're seeing here in Port Phillip Bay?
I think pollution. And one of my most heart-wrenching experiences swimming and scuba diving here was seeing our beloved weedy sea dragon stuck in a shopping bag. My first instinct was, oh, get the bag off it, but I thought, no, I have to document this and to show people. And so we did document it, and then we gently grabbed this beautiful fish and we took the bag off it.
Why should people care about this ecosystem and the plastic issue in particular?
So I think it's incredibly selfish of us not to value this place when it gives so much to us, even though we don't necessarily see it. It helps to regulate our climate. It gives us so much joy. It gives us food, medicine. And that's why our work is so important to, I suppose, take this blue veil off and show people how magical it is.
NPAs create a safe haven for an abundance of animals here in Australia. But as our expedition continues, we'll come to see the impacts of plastics have no borders. To learn more about plastic pollution and find out how you can take action to make a positive difference in your community, visit EarthEcho International at earthecho.org. EarthEcho Expedition is sponsored by the Northrop Grumman Foundation. Northrop Grumman is a leading global security company dedicated to increasing STEM education opportunities for students and the teachers who inspire them.
Weedy sea dragon, they really are just aliens on Earth. When you see them underwater, it's one of the coolest experiences you can have. And though I didn't see it myself, every time I watch that video that Cherie shared of that weedy sea dragon caught in the plastic bag, it breaks my heart. So from there, that was really a few clips of our Plastic Seas expedition. We had, I know there's a lot of resources that Joe has that we shared, all our educational resources, all our teacher resources, for other videos, etc., that are available. But Joe, I wanted to, if there was an opportunity to have a conversation or chat with any of the youth that have joined us, or anybody, teachers, etc., why don't we jump into that kind of after having set that context?
All right, absolutely, Philippe. Thank you for those video clips. They're absolutely amazing. And I lived in just outside of Sydney in a place called Wollongong for a year and got to dive with weedy sea dragons, and they're just absolutely beautiful.
Aren't they? Oh my God, absolutely. They're the coolest thing ever.
All right. Well, we've got a great group of classrooms joining us. I'm going to start popping some of them in to grab some of their questions. Those tuning in via YouTube and Facebook, use the chat sidebar now, and I'll grab some of your questions. But let's get started. So I'm going to bring our first group in. Mrs. Foster's class is joining us from Tuscaloosa. How are we doing today, boys and girls?
Good.
All right.
Go ahead, ask a question. How do you decide on what stories you're going to tell and what topics you're going to cover on your television shows?
That's a great question. So thank you for that. Hi, everybody. Terrific to have you join us. You know, we do, of course, with EarthEcho in particular, with our expedition series, we look for what are the big issues that people are talking about right now, and how can we help shed light on those issues, and how do we help educators and teachers interpret those issues for young people, for you all, because we know we spend a lot of time in schools around the world that these are issues that are worrisome and scary for all of us, and so how can we help provide real scientifically sound information and knowledge so that you can understand the issue and do something about it. For my TV shows, like I host a series called Awesome Planet, a syndicated show. Joe mentioned it earlier. We also really look for themes in the series. So each episode may have a theme like wind, or maybe the most wild places on Earth, or the most incredible animals, or whales, or sharks, or things like that. And then we look for important issues and important research that's happening around those animals. So, for example, when we look at whales, we were out in Hawaii with researchers that are trying to understand the impact of noise pollution from all the ships going in and around Maui, and the ferries and things like that, on the humpback whale population there, because the area around Maui is very shallow, out for several miles, and is a really safe place for mothers to give birth and raise their calves for the first few weeks of their life, while the babies are trying to fatten up then for their migratory trips north to the Arctic. And so we went there. We went up to look at orcas in the San Juan Islands off of Seattle and Washington State in the United States. So that's the kind of thing we really look for themes, and we really look for important scientists that we can profile and work that's happening that's important that people need to know about. And then, as I said, particularly when it comes to EarthEcho, but also Awesome Planet or the books or any of the other programs that we do, we really look at how we can provide resources and tools to help understand what you can do about it, because it's not just enough to be equipped with knowledge. We also have to recognize the power that we have, each of us, to do something to make it better. And so that's a big part also of the stories that we seek to tell.
All right, great question. We're going to bring in our next group, Miss Saunders grade 6s. They're joining us in North Bay, Ontario. So here in Canada, we're ready for you.
Hi, my name is Colton, And I just want to know what it was like growing up under the legacy of Jacques Cousteau.
Well, that's a great question. It was an honor. Very much influenced by my grandfather. Got to see him several times a year. He's a busy guy, but you know, a lot of the work that I do today is directly inspired by both my grandfather and my father. In fact, we founded EarthEcho in honor of my father, Philippe Sr., who tragically was killed in an airplane accident just a few months before I was born. But he left behind many documentaries and books and programs that I grew up with, and really inspired me to recognize that no matter what path I decided to pursue, what matter subject, no matter what my interests were, that I have a responsibility as a human being on this planet to try and make the world a better place. And you know, growing up, listening to my grandfather's stories, watching my father's films and documentaries, I always felt like, wow, this exploring and filming, I mean, this is like modern real life Indiana Jones. This is something I wanted to do. But I'll tell you, I'm not a marine biologist. I'm not a scientist. I'm actually, I studied history at university. I was always really good at more of the art side of subjects at school, and still found a way as a storyteller to pursue my passion for exploring the world. I have the good fortune to work with extraordinary scientists and people who are really good at that part of and fascinated by the science and the math side, which is also very important. And really what I found over the years is that, and this is really the wisdom of my mother telling me that, you know, no matter what you're interested in, pursue your passions, but find a way that you can make the world a better place. And she always told us, I don't care if you want to be a doctor or a mechanic or a pilot or whatever it is, you can make a positive difference in the choices that you make and the influence you have on the people around you. And so as someone who always liked history and storytelling, I pursued a career in that, very much, again, inspired by the storytelling of my grandfather and father. But it was always an honor. And frankly, the reason that I focus on education is because both my grandfather and father would always say, before we can talk about conservation, we have to talk about education. They realized that young people, that you all, and this is not just a, you know, rhetoric. This is true and heartfelt, and comes from 20 years working in education. That young people are the ones who are not only going to create a better world, but the ones today. We work with youth leaders around the world at EarthEcho, and we have young leaders who at 13 have helped draft laws for their state legislatures here in the United States. We have young business entrepreneurs who have started businesses around composting. We waste 40% on average in the world. 40% of the food that we grow, we waste. We throw out, or it rots before it can make it to market. In the United States, it's mostly we just throw out a lot of food. Same in Canada. And so we have we have youth leaders that have started small businesses in their towns that have spread out to communities all around them to be profitable businesses of composting, to allow people to bring their waste food for a small fee, drop it off, and then they get good, healthy soil for their gardens in return. So we're really empowered, and it's really what gives me hope, is to see young people around the world who are doing extraordinary work now, today, to transform their communities in really impactful ways.
All right. I think that's absolutely awesome. I think it, you know, the kind of misconception that you have to be older to make an impact, to make a difference. When at any age, if you're passionate, you can have an impact, make a difference.
Absolutely.
Cool. So we're heading to Homestead, Florida this time. Ms. Delgado is joining us with her high school students. How you doing, Ms. Delgado?
Hi, how are you? And it's great to meet you, Mr. Cousteau. These are a group of seniors, high school seniors in the southern part of Florida. And Erica, she has a great question for you. As a consultant on international resort development, what kind of sustainable solutions have you helped implement?
Well, Linda, that's a great question. It's a pleasure to see you all. I've spent actually a lot of time. I lived in Florida for a few years, spent a lot of time in Florida. We've done a lot of work with down in Miami-Dade and that in South Florida and Broward and those communities. over the years. Spent a lot of time in the Everglades, Florida Keys, etc., as you can imagine. So I'm familiar with that area, and but in general, in terms of our work in sustainability and tourism, tourism is the largest voluntary transfer of wealth in the history of humanity, and tourism can be an amazing tool and powerful tool for good and for bad. And so what we really look at is how can tourism provide opportunities that can be regenerative and restorative to a community. I'll give you a couple examples. One, for example, is a project I'm working on in Saudi Arabia, believe it or not, where they're developing a resort along the coast of the Red Sea. And in the Red Sea, the coral reefs are very, very healthy still, because they've evolved to adapt to warmer temperatures over thousands of years, as the Red Sea is the saltiest and warmest body, of water in the world, of salt water at least. And but however, there's a lot of local pressures from a fishing perspective. So the fish populations have declined a lot over the last several decades. And so as part of the work with the resort, what we're doing is we are establishing a marine protected area over the course of maybe 100 plus square miles around this entire coastal region, and taking those fishermen who have been fishing there for generations and are now ostensibly out of work, but know those waters very well, and retraining and offering them jobs that are more sustainable and also more predictable. Because every time a fisherman goes out to catch fish, they have to spend money on fuel, right? But they may not catch fish. But every time they go out and take tourists on experiences, diving or snorkeling, whatever it may be, they get paid. And so we're retraining these out-of-work fishermen to be working in the local community and working with this resort to provide them a sustainable income and to create a marine protected area in this region of Saudi Arabia. We've also seen this work in places in Mexico, in Indonesia, you name it. So that kind of idea where as we look at what people are searching for, particularly your generation, Gen Z and Gen X, millennials, this whole era, next gen, increasingly people realize that they want real experiences. They don't just want to go and sit like in an enclosed wall on a beach sipping a pina colada. They want to actually experience the world, because I think as we are more and more removed from the world through electronic devices, we crave authenticity, and also we crave a healthy environment. And so that becomes a higher value commodity in the tourism space. People are realizing that there are tools and techniques that they can employ, like marine protected areas, to help the ecosystem recover and rebound and stay healthy, and thus draw more tourists over time. Because for most destinations, if they have long-term thinking, it's the local environment that is their main asset. And if they don't take care of it, that asset quality degrades, and that's not a good investment. So it really comes down to the financial dollars and cents of it, frankly, in terms of this growing sense of regenerative, restorative travel, where not only do we want to, because we don't just want to sustain the way the environment is. I mean, let's face it, the Florida Keys is a dead zone. The Everglades is a third of what it used to be. We have these algal blooms in Florida, just in Florida, massive problems. The Indian River Lagoon, which is one of the most biodiverse, coastal estuaries in the world, is now in bad shape. So, we want to restore nature, and it's possible. That's the good news. So there's a lot of bad news here, and as we're coming up on time here, let's say, do we have time for any more questions, Joe?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay, good.
So we've got Mrs. Clyde's 6th graders in California joining us. How you doing? Oops, let me make sure you're unmuted here. There we go.
Oh, hi. Great to meet you. Thanks for being here. So we're on the coast as well, and I have some 6th grade students who are wondering, I think they were a little shocked by what you were telling them, and they're wondering, how will we ever clear the oceans of plastic if it's not biodegradable? So what are we doing? What can we do?
Well, there's 2 things that we need to do. And hello, fellow California. I'm in West Hollywood right now, so not too far away. It's a great question, and one that we deal with a lot, and we actually have some really cool resources under Plastic Seas at EarthEcho, and some some fun design challenges for students to engage in to help solve some of these problems as well. So check those out. But there's fundamentally a couple things that we need to be thinking about, and this is a call to action for all of you. One of them is thinking about innovation. So in the plastic seas, one of the issues that we explore are solutions. And one of the Jen Lavers, who did the bolus dissection with me, was talking about how in Australia they're looking at they grow an extraordinary amount of bananas in Australia, and there are a lot of researchers, scientists, chemical engineers, all sorts of different people that are looking at how to take that waste of banana plantations and turn it into plastic, a plastic-like substance that is actually biodegradable. Imagine. And so there's lots of innovation out there using seaweed to create plastic replacements that, again, is biodegradable. So we need that kind of innovation, and we need you all to be pursuing these kinds of subjects, STEM subjects, for example, to be thinking about becoming those pioneers and those innovating solutions. So we need to be thinking differently about the waste stream going into the environment and finding alternatives. We need to also be eliminating the single-use plastics. That's very, very important. Why are we using straws and bags and plastic bottles for a few moments that then go on to devastate the environment for centuries? It doesn't make any sense. It does make a few people very rich, but it doesn't help any of us, except for maybe some convenience, but that's not a worthy trade-off. Because what we're also finding is that these microplastics, plastic is like a sponge, I said that at the very beginning, it absorbs toxins. And the fish and the animals that are eating those microplastics, and it gets caught into their gut, they're absorbing those toxins, PCBs and dioxins and other things. And then when human beings eat those fish, they're absorbing those toxins. It's all circular. Everything is connected. And so there's very real consequences for our human health to this issues of plastics in the environment. So we need to reduce the amount of plastics that we're using. We need to come up with plastic alternatives for those uses that can't be replaced. And one of the challenges is we're still trying to figure out how do we effectively and economically eliminate plastic that's already in the ocean. That's a very, very hard thing to do. The ocean is 70+% of this planet, and there's plastic everywhere. There are thousands of pieces of plastic floating in every square kilometer of the ocean. So the first thing, the house is on fire. We need to put the fire out. We need to stop the flow of plastic into the environment, not just here in the United States, but around the world. And that means buying products that are eliminating or not using plastics. For example, you can now buy cleaning products in tablets, in paper tablets, that you then put into water, into a plastic bottle that maybe you already have and reuse over and over. There's all sorts of cool innovations that are happening now out there. Sneakers, Nike has a new line of sneakers. We're not involved or endorsing anything, but that's using fabric that is recycled fabrics from old clothes. So there's a lot of innovation out there, and shopping is politics. So what you're buying, what you're using, and then obviously voting. I know as sixth graders, you're not old enough to vote, but you do have a lot of influence on the people around you who can vote. Make sure that people are voting. The environment, whatever party they want to vote for, whatever part of the world that you're in, be it Canada, the United States, anywhere, make sure that politicians are no longer sacrificing the environment for their short-term gain of any political persuasion. So those are a couple of things. And I can tell you this too, there's a new campaign in the world, well, not new, it's been around for a few years, but it's really gaining prominence now, called 30 by 30. In the last 40 years, we have lost half the biodiversity on Earth. Half. In my lifetime, I'm 40. 68% of nature, wildlife, animals, has disappeared in that same amount of time. Scary stuff, I know, but bear with me, because there's hope, I promise. And that hope is understanding that nature has an extraordinary ability to renew itself and to regenerate itself. I've seen this all over the world. I was talking about marine protected areas just a moment ago in tourism. And we've seen how in marine protected areas, when we give nature a break, that she can recover. There's an area in the Marshall Islands where we filmed a documentary. My wife, Ashlyn, and I filmed a documentary for Discovery Channel called Nuclear Sharks a few years ago. And we went to a place that was devastated by nuclear bomb testing in the 1950s. And 60 years later, because it became a de facto marine resort because of the radioactivity on land, nobody went there. The sea life is flourishing. Hundreds of sharks would be swirling around, healthy coral. So if nature can recover after we dropped 20 plus nuclear bombs on it, nature can recover anywhere. And that's the hopeful message. And so 30 by 30 is a campaign to protect 30% of the ocean by 2030. And in doing that, when the ocean is healthy, it is much more resilient against climate change, ocean acidification, pollution, etc. And these ecosystems can thrive and can survive these kinds of issues. But if we're dumping pollution and we're doing all these other types of things and overfishing and all this stuff, they're already sick. They're not going to be able to survive all these bigger issues. So that's a really useful tool. We have the tools to restore the environment, to return the oceans to abundance. We can do that in our lifetime. You can do that in your lifetime. And we're here to support you at EarthEcho. We provide a lot of resources and youth leadership training. That's all focused on that. How do we help you not, again, just be the leaders of tomorrow, but the leaders of today in any community at any age. So that's the good news, is that you have power. And so how you use that power, we're here to help you.
All right. Well, Philippe, I think that's a perfect spot to kind of wrap up things for today. I really liked how you shared, arts was more kind of your background in school, because it takes, all kinds of backgrounds. Anybody can be involved in protecting our planet, in spreading the word. And I think those clips that you shared with us really highlighted how you can tell a story, use impactful images and words to really make a difference and put things out there for people to see.
Well, Joe, it's a pleasure, man. I always enjoy joining you and all the terrific classrooms that participate. And I do want to say, everybody, you probably hear from Joe, but I'm really, really excited. Tomorrow at 9 a.m. Eastern, Expedition. We've got it's Sally and Winnie, I think, Joe, that are joining the expedition leaders. This is an all-woman expedition that's traveling around the world exploring the impacts of plastic pollution. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. Eastern, East Coast time, U.S. East Coast time. Don't miss it. It's going to be really amazing. This is an amazing project. So this continues. So I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned a few things. As I said, and Joe said earlier, we've got links to EarthEcho and all the resources there. And we are thrilled that you joined us today. And so thank you very much. I look forward to the next time. We're going to be doing more of these, I think, Joe, around endangered species come October, November. I have a book that we're going to be talking about that's coming out next week, September 29th, The Endangereds. And so we're going to be doing some fun stuff around endangered species coming up. So I'll also be joining you in a couple of weeks again. Thank you all. Thank you, Joe, for the amazing work that you do and for having me on. I really, really appreciate all your time.
Excellent. Well, the educators who are on camera today, I will send you some cool links afterwards. And as well, in the recording, the YouTube video from today, I'll add some really cool links for those who are tuning in online and those who are watching it now after it's completed. So again, Philippe, thank you so much for taking us around the world and sharing those perspectives with us. We can all make a difference.
Thanks, Joe.
All right. Thanks, everyone.